Greetings and salutations. Thanks for clicking on the video. This is the results of the Linux test 2014. Back in, what was it? Never can remember this. It's January, February, March, April. Ubuntu released 14.04, their LTS release, and I decided to upgrade my laptop, which had been running 12.04 since it had been released. And I was so impressed and intrigued by it that it kind of set me off on a Linux distro hopping spree that has lasted pretty much all summer long. And I know for a fact that I have tried at least 30 different flavors out of the 100 or so distributions available. And I thought that it would be kind of cool to do a video and talk a little bit about what I came up with and what I ended up actually using. Now on the laptop, I have used 14.04 since it was released and have had very, very little trouble with it, and it works very well. The Ubuntu developers did a wonderful job. But it got me thinking about maybe doing some other installs, especially on this big old behemoth machine. 5 years ago, this was a very fast machine, and just so you know what I'm working with here, it's got 3 CPU cores, it's a 3 gigahertz processor, 8 gigs of RAM. A lot of it's being sucked up right now, and you'll find out why. And so this is the base that I'm working on. It's a Dell Inspiron 570 machine, and I am using VMware to run virtual machines, and this was the testing grounds for all of those different Linux distributions. Some of them worked wonderfully, others I had a great deal of difficulty with. I only want to talk about 5 today. I'm going to try and keep this video just a bit short. It could go on in detail forever, but we won't do that, okay? And this video is pretty much for anybody who already knows a little bit about Linux. So I'm not going to be into any great detail, but if you're a total newbie and you're watching this, some of it might go past you, okay? And I'll be glad to answer any questions if you send me a message or whatever the deal is. All right, so let's get into it. The first 2 distributions that I want to talk about are ones that I had pretty good luck with but didn't end up keeping installed for some reason. So therefore, we are going to look at the we're going to look at their web pages and their screenshots. And the first one we want to look at, I want to talk about, is OpenSUSE. And this is the latest version, 13.1, and this is what it looks like when it runs the KDE desktop. I tried all the desktops, every one of them, and just like I had figured out several years ago when I first got into really virtualizing Linux installs and playing with them, I don't like the KDE desktop. I still don't like it. It's not for me. However, I did install the OpenSUSE XFCE version, which you can select during the install process. And one of the things that I really liked about OpenSUSE was the installer, because it was very thorough and it asked you a lot of questions. Now, when you're dealing with the Ubuntus and the Linux Mints of the world, the installer really is about as automated as it gets. I mean, you set up a user account, you tell it where you are, and you tell it what kind of keyboard you have and what language you speak, and that's it, and then it takes care of itself. Any changes to the system after that, you have to do pretty much manually after it's installed. OpenSUSE, on the other hand, has an installer that allows you to configure your installation pretty much exactly the way you want it without having to open a configuration file once you open the distro and it boots up. The other thing I really liked about OpenSUSE was the fact that I was running it in VMware, VMware Player 6, and I installed it, and it came up working. There was no need to install the VMware Player tools, and if you would install it in VirtualBox, the guest editions would already be there. So if you use VirtualBox or know what that is, OpenSUSE comes up ready to go with everything installed, and you don't have to do any of that. It's a big distribution. It's 4.7 gigabytes, And I suggest, instead of trying to download that 4.7 gigabyte file, that what you should do is do the net install. And the way you do that, if you want to try this and play with it, the way you do the net install is you come down here and it says network. This is the download page, and you select what you want from your distribution. It downloads a very small ISO image, and you put that on your CD or your USB stick or whatever the install medium you're using is. And then when you boot it up, it will go out and it'll download the install program, get it running, you go through the install, and then all of the packages come down off the network. As a matter of fact, I have a very slow internet connection, and so what I did was I started it in the evening and then I went to bed. I just set it up, turned it loose. When I got up the next morning, it was already rebooted, it was running, and everything worked. Now, why didn't I keep OpenSUSE? Well, OpenSUSE is an enterprise distro, and it's for people who are really into Linux. You have to know your way around. Even though it comes 100% configured to work out of the box, there are certain things that don't, and the big thing is anything to do with multimedia. And you also have to go out and get the Pacman repository, which is pretty cool. I like Pacman, don't get me wrong. But you have to set up the repository first. Then you can go get your codecs and your multimedia stuff. And even after I went through all that, I still had some things that wouldn't work. I could not get OpenSUSE to play an AVI file. And I looked it up, and it's a known issue. I never got it to work completely, so I ended up walking away from it. Now, I'm sure there's a way around that. And I'm sure that there's an OpenSUSE junkie out there right now who is saying, hey, all you had to do was do this. And, well, I didn't find that information at the time. So I moved on. This is a bit much of a distribution for me, actually, the whole OpenSUSE experience. It is a bit much. So let me go back to the screenshot. And it really is designed around KDE, although it runs the XFCE desktop nicely. So that's pretty much all I got to say about OpenSUSE. They did a wonderful job. You can convert it to a rolling distribution, which is really cool. You can change your repositories. The YAST system setup thing is just awesome to work with. So if you're just like you just want a big major distribution to run on your desktop, and you don't mind doing a little bit of configuring once you get it up and running, this is the distribution for you, for sure. So we can go ahead and close that page. We can go ahead and close this page. Well, that's the search page. We don't want to close that. Let's go ahead and close this, and let's talk about Manjaro, which was the other distribution that I was very impressed with but didn't end up keeping. Manjaro is a spin-off of Arch Linux. And for those of you who know what Arch Linux is, you know that Arch Linux is notoriously hard to install and configure. The Manjaro folks want to use the great features of Arch Linux and make it easier to actually get up and running on your system. And they've done a great job. And when it comes up, it's good to go. And you can get into the Arch user repositories, the AUR. You can use all those tools. They have some wonderful tools that come with this. The software manager that they use for dealing with those repositories is just fantastic. It'll go out there and build your packages. It warns you if there's any conflicts, keeps everything all nice and, it helps you to keep things very neat and clean as you install and remove software. I like that. I love having access to that AUR because pretty much every open source piece of software there is in there. And so for the, let's say somewhere in the middle to the more advanced user, Manjaro is just absolutely an awesome, totally customizable distribution with lots of great community support, and you can find out pretty much how to do anything. So the main reason I did not keep an installation of Manjaro was that I personally had a problem getting it to run properly in VMware. Now, there are scripts out there that you can go get to install VMware tools, and they worked, but the one thing it didn't work was the accelerated video, which was some sort of driver issue. And I poked at it 2 or 3 times, and I never could quite figure it out. And I looked for a solution, and I didn't find it, and so therefore I moved on. However, if you're not planning on virtualizing this in VMware, you're going to put it on hardware, or you're going to run it in VirtualBox, then this is just an awesome distribution for intermediate to serious advanced Linux users. Manjaro is pretty cool, and it's very user friendly. Maybe a newbie could start out in Manjaro. I'm not really sure. It's just, you got to understand repositories. You got to understand the kernel. They have a kernel management tool, which is pretty awesome. So I'm seriously considering, if I come across like an old laptop or another box, I'm thinking about loading Manjaro on it. I just can't do it on hardware right now. And we'll get more into that in a little bit, exactly why it keeps me from doing that. And my laptop runs Ubuntu, as I have said, and my kids use it, and they know how to use Ubuntu, and so therefore I'm not messing with that. All right, so there we go. We've looked at Manjaro, we've looked at OpenSUSE. Like I said, for intermediate to experienced users, great distros. OpenSUSE did present more trouble than Manjaro. Manjaro's problem was exclusive to getting it to run in VMware. That was it. Great distros, period. Now, let's move on to the next section, which are the distros that I have actually decided to keep and I actually am running on my system. And the first one that I want to talk about is good old Ubuntu 14.04 LTS. This is actually 14.04.1. And for those of you who saw my last video about how to dual boot safely, this is the exact installation that I set up for that video. What I did was I cloned it and I put it in virtual drive, from the virtual drive to actually from the real hard drive that it was installed on so I could do the video. I cloned that drive image and then loaded it into VMware, just used Clonezilla to load the image in there, and it booted up. There was a few things that I had to do to fix it. So for those of you who don't know a whole great deal about Ubuntu, it is a very popular distribution, and it is the distribution that started about 10 years ago, started the whole trend toward making the Linux experience more user-friendly and that sort of thing. So there's a lot to talk about with Ubuntu as a distribution. But a few years ago, Ubuntu decided that they were going to go their own way as far as desktops were concerned. When the GNOME folks went from the GNOME 2 platform to the GNOME 3 platform, they decided to go in a different direction, and they created their own desktop environment called Unity, which you are looking at now. And everything in Unity, you come in here to find your software, you come in here to find your your programs, whatever. When you install it by default, it'll even go out and search the internet from this little thing here they call the dash, and there's the dash. You get Firefox as your browser, you get Thunderbird as your email, you get LibreOffice. This is all comes installed, and many other applications that you probably find very useful. And we're going to go ahead and open these up here and let you take a look at what it looks like running in the Unity environment. As a matter of fact, let's just full screen this thing so you get the whole effect. There's my Thunderbird mail. There is Firefox running, and if you come over here, you can't minimize by clicking here, but you can maximize once you minimize. So you can do that, but you can't go the other way. This functions like a dock over here, and it's always there. You can get it to auto hide. I usually do not auto hide it because it's a bit of a pain, and the auto hide feature works some of the time. So this is what the desktop looks like. And a lot of people don't like Unity. Some people love it. I'm kind of on the fence about it myself. I like it. It gets the job done, but I don't hate it, but it's not my preferred place to be. So there you go. Ubuntu 14.04, and this is what it looks like, and this is what you get. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about Ubuntu, because it is what it is, and pretty much everybody knows what Ubuntu is. Okay, moving on to the next virtual machine experience that we want to talk about. Linux Mint. Oh, Linux Mint. I do love Linux Mint. I love you guys. You are the greatest things on the planet. Linux Mint is one hell of a distribution, and some people would argue, and I would have to listen carefully to what they said, that it is the best Linux distribution out there. You are looking at the Cinnamon desktop. This is the Cinnamon menu right here. Very functional. You get the same pretty much suite of software that you get with Ubuntu. You get good old Firefox. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open that up. And the reason why it's taking so long to run, guys, is that we're recording. It's actually a whole lot snappier when the screen capture is not running and bogging down some of the system resources on this machine. So you get good old Firefox, and you get good old Thunderbird right out of the box, and then you have this wonderful multi-screen environment thing. You can drag applications back and forth. So if you're a fan of you can add more of these if you want to. Get rid of them there. That's a very cool layout for the system. Also, you have another view that you can use, which is called the Expo view, which is sort of like what goes on in GNOME 3, if you've ever seen the GNOME 3 desktop, where you can get like a bird's eye view of all the apps running. This is how they've adapted it into the Cinnamon experience. The Cinnamon experience is based on GNOME 3. One of the great things about working with Mint is their software manager. Unlike Ubuntu, the software management experience in Mint is awesome. So we're going to take a look here, and of course it asks for your password. Go ahead and close this up. Close the mail. This is how you... Well, this is Synaptic Package Manager. I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and it comes installed, by the way, Synaptic. I wanted to look at the software. Clicked on the wrong thing. Software Manager, okay? Probably not going to like to run with Synaptic running at the same time. They usually don't, but we'll see what happens. It may or may not launch properly with both these applications running. And it's not. Don't think it's going to do it. Let's do that again without Synaptic running. When it comes there, no, it was running. It was coming up in the background. Duh. All right. What is this? Yeah, I got 2 copies of the software manager. I only need 1. Thank you. Here you can install software from the Mint repositories, from the Ubuntu repositories, and this is just awesome. You can find software. Let's just look at Internet Apps real quick, and we'll go ahead and open that up. And give that a click. And we get these wonderful lists. You can search for packages, you can browse, and if you want to install something, like Firefox will already be installed, but we'll go look at the page anyway. You can come in here and you can install Firefox or any web browser you like. Very nice way to work with software and getting it off and on the machine. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you get the Synaptic Package Manager, which we just took a look at, so I don't think I'll open that again. That's a more advanced way of dealing with software. And since this is an Ubuntu-based distribution, which is also based on Debian, you can get a Debian version of Mint, and Ubuntu is based on Debian. All of the Debian-style tools work, like apt-get, the apt software management for doing things from the terminal. That's all good too. It's all there, and you can use GDebi to do your packages. And Mint just comes totally ready to go out of the box. It'll play video, it'll play all the video formats, it'll record audio, it'll play MP3s. Very little you need to get to actually go install to make anything multimedia work. And it just comes with all kinds of little tools in here, USB stick formatters, and you can make system images. You can burn system images to USB sticks. And there's a book that's out about, I wanted to mention this for sure while we were talking about Linux Mint. There's a great book out written by Jay LaCroix, Jay the Linux guy here on YouTube, called Linux Mint Essentials. And if you would like to know this distribution inside and out and upside down and what you can do with it, I highly recommend going and finding that book, Linux Mint Essentials by Jay LaCroix. Linux Mint, an awesome distribution for anybody, starter, or even if you want to do more advanced stuff and you just really don't want to worry about sitting around and configuring things. You want something that works out of the box. You want something that's well supported. I love the way Mint handles updates. I do want to show you that before we get out of here. I love this update manager. They actually rank the updates. I don't think any are available right now, but we'll try and refresh this and see. They rank the updates, and they also make it very easy to go and find the fastest repository mirrors for you. There's a lot of great videos about Linux Mint. It is, according to DistroWatch, the most popular distribution of Linux there is right now. So, yeah, see, no updates. I'm all up to date. That's a good thing. Okay, so that's all I'm really going to say about Linux Mint. It is an awesome distribution, and would I install this on hardware if I got another box? Oh, absolutely, I would put it on hardware. As a matter of fact, I was very tempted to blow Ubuntu 14.04 off of the laptop and put this on, but I decided, just for the sake of continuity, and since the Unity desktop seems to work so well with the hardware on the old AMD Acer laptop, that I would just leave it alone. I didn't want to have to install and uninstall and all that stuff. And of course, go to linuxmint.com. Check out all the different distributions. I like the Cinnamon desktop. You can get it with KDE, XFCE. You can get the Mate desktop. A lot of fun options there with Linux Mint. All right, and let's talk about the last distribution that I wanted to talk about, which is actually one of the lesser distributions, but it has turned out to be my favorite of the bunch. And so I'm really torn. If somebody handed me a computer right now and they said, well, what would you install on the computer? I think that what I would do is actually probably set up a dual boot Manjaro, Linux Mint, and this distribution, because I go back and forth between the three of them, and I like them. This is XFCE Xubuntu, and it is a very cool distribution of Linux. This is one of the spin-offs of Ubuntu. Now, the Ubuntu 14.04 LTS is supported for like 5 years until 2019. This will only be supported for 3, so you get till the next LTS and 1 year after that, but that's okay. It's no big deal. And I have done a lot of customization on this desktop. I've done a lot with it. This is the file manager, Thunar, which is pretty much everything you need and nothing you don't, which is really cool. Now, that's one of the differences between these distributions, is that Ubuntu uses Nautilus, and Mint uses Nemo, and these guys use Thunar. Now, they pretty much look the same, but they're just slightly different in the way they operate. I like Thunar. I like the way it works. I've done a Numix style theme here. I'm not done theming this, okay? So that's what Thunar looks like. And you get an active desktop, which is something I really like. If you're familiar with the old Windows 95, 98 days, and XP days, that sort of functionality on a desktop, you will have no problem adapting to XFCE. This is the whisker menu. I put a custom icon down here for Ubuntu and put Xubuntu in here. This is all configurable. You can change this any way you want to. Down here in the panel, you've got some quick launchers. Put some extra widgets in over here. I love my weather widget that you can set up. And this is all you got to do is go to panel properties. You're going to add new items, new widgets. Awesome. XFCE is by far my favorite desktop of the bunch. I love working with XFCE. One of the reasons I like Manjaro is that's the default desktop there. You can also get a default XFCE, or not a default, but you can get the XFCE desktop in Linux Mint. Now, the only trick to XFCE, and why I wouldn't necessarily say this is for the absolute beginner, is that it's very lightweight and it doesn't come with some of the things that you'd want installed, like you don't have time management installed with the Xubuntu version. There's several little things that don't come out of the box, and you have to go configure them yourselves. Not hard to do, but you might click on something and wonder why it's not working, and then go, oh, it's not there yet, or whatever the deal is. And it's a fully functional system. There's just some things that aren't there. As far as software management is concerned, you use the Ubuntu Software Center. Here's your settings. Here's your software updater. But really, when it comes to updating software on Ubuntu distributions, I'm a big fan of just using the terminal and going in and putting in the command to update. This terminal is the XFCE drop-down terminal, and I set a shortcut whenever I hit it, F12, it shows up. I also changed the shortcut to be like Ubuntu, where Control, Alternate, and T will open up the regular terminal. So I've got two ways to get to the terminal. Let's see, what else can you do with this? You can have different workspaces on this, but then if you do have your different workspaces, then you don't get your snapping. So if you're not I'm not a huge fan of having workspaces on the desktop anyway, so it's no big deal. So let me go ahead and open these up so you can see what they look like. Good old Firefox and Thunderbird. This also comes, it didn't come with LibreOffice. It came with AbiWord. That's another thing. So that's what I'm talking about, some things not being installed. Of course, if you know how to install and uninstall software, no big deal. Just put on whatever you want. I just like the desktop experience. It is very similar to Cinnamon in Linux Mint, but the XFCE desktop tends to be just a bit snappier. Which is what I like about it. And I didn't show you what I wanted to show you when I opened those up because I got talking about something else. You can snap things here. So I'm trying to do the side snap. The hot corners don't work very well in VMware. It's something that they need to work on, because I was actually testing the GNOME 3 desktop and I was noticing that the corners didn't work very well. So I have to do some keystrokes to get to those sorts of things. Anyway, XFCE desktop, very lightweight, easy to use, highly customizable, and you can pretty much make it do whatever you want it to do. Here's a really cool little app that they have here. It's this little mail widget goes out and checks and see if you have any mail in your mailbox. That's all it does. It doesn't download the mail, and it turns gold if you have mail. A little mail notifier. That's kind of cool, especially if you're waiting on mail. And then I've configured it to where when you click it, it goes to it. And let me go ahead and open up and show the properties here. You see how this thing's set up. So it's real easy to set up. You just go in and you put your email in there. You choose Gmail. Oh, by the way, don't choose IMAP and then try and configure it for Gmail, because it won't work. I poked at this thing for 20 minutes, scratching my head, trying to figure out what I was doing, and then I realized no, I hadn't chosen a Gmail account from this drop-down list, and that's all I needed to do to get it to work. And that's it. Very cool little. Lots of functionality on the XFCE desktop. So there you go, gang. Those are the top 3 distributions from my Linux test. I have, like I said, I tested probably, I have no idea, 25 or 30 different distributions. I even tried FreeBSD. That's not Linux, that's Unix. I actually tried those distributions, both the PCBSD and the FreeBSD. I poked at. So these are the ones that I got the most out of and actually got them to do what I needed them to do. And they're still living here. And maybe at some point, somewhere way down the road, I don't know, I'll eliminate one or archive one of these machines. But for right now, I'm just going to keep them all running so I can play with them whenever I want to, which is the whole point. And probably the next Linux video I'll do is if somebody, like I said, if I come across a new box, then I'm going to have some decisions to make, because it's either going to be one of these three or it's going to be Manjaro. But I'm leaning toward Manjaro because I didn't get to play with that as much as I wanted to. All right, thanks for watching the vid. I hope you found it at least slightly entertaining, and comments and suggestions are always welcome. We will talk again soon. Bye.